Yeah, very well. Thank you, Andrew. And yourself?
Yeah, doing really well. Doing really well. So, it's a pleasure to record this podcast today where we're doing a joint event together next week. It's going to be our first one and hopefully the first of many. But we're going to be talking to an executive and business owner group around how to lead, both now and in the future, with all of the complexity that we've got. So many geopolitical events, AI, increasing compliance demands, you name it, we've got it right now. And so being a business owner or an executive is a tough gig
Mhm.
at the moment. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how to face into that and to move through it next week. And so we're going to give a preview to that tonight, for those that can't make it to our event next week. And yeah, hopefully we can share some wisdom that you'll benefit from. So thought we'd start off, Jay. I'd just love to check in with you.
Mm,
You're working with a lot of CEOs and big companies at the moment, and I'd really love to just take a pulse check
sure.
on what you're seeing out there in the wild with the executives of companies here in Australia and beyond.
Yeah.
What are they thinking about? What are they worried about? What are they facing into at the moment?
So a number of things in the subjective space. Really, self doubt is a big thing that
Mm,
really plagues executives, and that if you like, I don't like the term, but imposter syndrome, where
hmm
I feel like I'm not fit to function, even though the information that I'm getting back says contrary. I don't
hmm
believe it. That's the big subjective.
mm,
In terms of capacity to make decisions, getting caught in individual perspectives is another really big one,
mm,
and not being able to step out of either my own perspective or the more objective behavioral output perspective, where I'm really good at getting stuff done, but I can't seem to identify how to address this challenge with my people, for example. And the
yep.
ability to swap perspectives is a really big one. And then the third big thing in that space is the the self leadership and self development that needs to happen for an executive to keep up with the complexity.
Yep.
And unfortunately, in our world, which is driven by and rewards success, is success then becomes our greatest failing, because we stop
Mm,
looking at what we need to look at in order to grow. And so, unfortunately, we wait then for something to create some suffering to move us away from what we don't want as motivation. But because people and the people I work with are very successful, they fall asleep to their own potential. They fall asleep to the opportunities to look at themselves because things are going well. And we don't tend to do that when things are going well. So, those are the three big kind of things I'm seeing in terms of executives facing complexity. I holistically agree with you, Andrew, that it is complexity is growing. There's no doubt about it. There's never been a tougher time to be a leader or an executive
mm,
in the world of business. There are so
totally.
many challenges you've listed. Geopolitical as one, and compliance as another. I would throw in there also, the people leadership is another
Mm,
huge, because we've got so many now generations in the pot that it's so complex to manage all these different generations of people, and that adds a layer of complexity. And I've worked with a couple of CEOs who've recently retired, and I asked them
okay.
what drove your retirement, and they
Mm,
each of them said the same thing: the level of complexity, particularly around people, is just becoming overwhelming. And
yeah.
one said to me the other day, "I think it's my time to step back and let somebody else step in who's closer to their generation, who's closer to their way of thinking and seeing the world, who's able
Mm,
to get stuff out of them." He said, "I don't want to have to do the work anymore. I've done the work." And so I just want to slow down now, and that's fair enough, right? There comes
Fair
a
enough.
time in your life where you're like, I just want to slow things down. I don't want to, like, he's been working at a furious pace. I've worked with him for 10 years, 10, 12 years. So he's been working on himself at a furious pace. But yeah, so
Wow.
that's what I'm hearing from executives who are retiring as well. The complexity is just becoming overwhelming, and
Yeah, 100%.
keeping up's difficult.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I mean, there's so much to pull apart in that. And, the first thing for me, in my first person perspective, just a little bit of a demonstration for a lock in of a first person perspective for a minute, I really identify myself 10 years ago in what you were talking about. I was running a company at 37,
Mm.
and it was actually way too complex for me and my cognitive, emotional, and
Yep.
social capacity at that age, and with my developmental altitude, which people may or may not know what we mean by that. But,
Yeah.
essentially that showed up for me as stress, overwhelm, frustration, physical exhaustion, brain
Did
fog, da
you
da
think
da da.
about getting a coach, Andrew? Did you think about getting a coach?
At that particular point in time, Jay, I thought coaches and coaching was full of shit.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
it's a very
And
commonly held view. Yeah.
yeah. And, it's only with the benefit of hindsight that I see the world very differently
Yeah.
now. And just for the audience, for the benefit of the listeners, Jay is my coach. So very grateful to have him on here today. Thank you, Jay. And yeah, I couldn't see that at the time, but I thought what got me there was going to get me further ahead. And,
Right.
actually for me being an executive, I thought it was going to be all tea in China, and it was the worst role I ever had.
Right.
And so, I made a big change for myself and then started to do this work. And so
Yep.
I resonate a lot with what you opened up with. I'd add on the self-doubt frame. I'd also add with what I'm seeing with a lot of my business owners and executives is almost like a self-shaming. In other words, they're sort of sitting here dealing with, let's say, AI,
Mm.
and probably knowing that they're going to need to make a whole bunch of people redundant, or at least that's their worldview at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And, so publicly they're sort of saying, everything's fine. Privately, they know that things are going to change radically over the next 12 months, and they haven't brought those two perspectives together.
Yep.
And so they're a little bit ashamed of the way that they're facing into what's about to occur in the economy and for their organization. So, and yeah, I agree with you. Imposter syndrome. A lot of people don't know much about AI. They don't know how to implement it in their organizations. They don't know how to communicate it. They don't know how to relate with it. They don't know how to relate with the people with that context. So yeah, really love what you shared. So thanks for starting us off with that.
Yeah, in terms of imposter syndrome, one of the interesting things that I see, Andrew, is that somebody who has that kind of self doubt that they run is usually a motivation strategy. Number one, it's a motivation
Yep.
away from what they don't want to have happen. And the second thing is that the structures that a person needs to hold in order to doubt themselves are indeed the very structures they need for success. And so the
Mm.
interesting thing about imposter syndrome is that people who suffer from imposter syndrome can actually, in my direct experience, do the role better than anyone else. They just don't trust
Yeah.
themselves and that's become so ingrained now. It's a motivation system, and they don't know how to motivate themselves otherwise. And so, unfortunately, it leads to a lot of overwhelm, which is the downside. So it
Yeah,
motivates
100%.
them, but leads to overwhelm, which is
Yeah,
what
yeah,
you're
it
talking about.
motivates you until it gasses you out, and then you have to find a different way. And so, yeah, that could be a nice segue into some of the stuff that we'll probably talk about a little bit later on, just in terms of what we're going to share next week. So, how do you see in your work the impacts of, let's say, AI on the people that you work with? What are they talking about? What are they thinking about? How are they relating with it? Has it come online much for your crew yet?
I think that most people are suffering not knowing. So they're
Mm.
suffering in the ambiguity of not knowing. and
Mm.
they don't know what's coming around the corner, but they know something's coming, as you
Mm.
said before, and so they don't know how to connect the dots about what's coming, and that
Yeah.
leads to, a fear, which leads back to the self doubt, which then fuels itself
Yep.
as a motivation strategy, and so on and so forth. But it's really the
Mm.
ambiguity and the dealing with the ambiguous nature of AI at the moment. It's evolving so fast that
Oh.
we most people have got no idea how. My wife has a PhD in learning sciences, and she's specializing in
Mm.
AI, and even
Mm.
she's saying, it is just so complex, and I know so little in such a vast landscape, and this is what I do for a
Right.
living.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. And so if we can keep going along that thread, if it's okay, let's just take ambiguity or uncertainty as a thing or a phenomena.
Mm.
What is your typical coaching approach or some of the frames that you would share with people in terms of how to lead themselves and therefore others through any ambiguity?
First, I like to understand what in the face of ambiguity, what meaning are they making?
Mm.
And then I like to really dig in to understand, so I can lay out like a picture. I can
Yep.
lay out, how do they do ambiguity for themselves? And then we
Right.
look at all the different aspects and identify the positive intention of the strategy in dealing
Yeah.
with ambiguity. And then we step back and get some objectivity and start asking, how's it really serving you? Is it delivering what you wanted to deliver? Is it giving you what you wanted? And if the answer is no to that question, is a new strategy needed? And only they can answer that question. I can't, because they may,
Yeah.
indeed, it might not be working, but at some level it may actually still be working. And so they've got to determine for themselves whether there's a tipping point in between it working and not working. Is the tipping point starting to move toward the not working? And if so, what's a different way of engaging with ambiguity and change?
Mm.
Because they're constants. We actually don't know what we don't know. So ambiguity
Right.
is always with us. And
You're sounding very Donald Rumsfeld for a moment there, Jay.
we're, try- we're trying to navigate ambiguity in a really concrete way, and
Mm.
we're making it up as we go along, but we don't know it. And so we know
Yeah.
it when we hit walls, and those when we hit those walls, then we begin to ask those questions. Bloody hell, what do I really know? And then we realize I know nothing, and then self doubt then fills that space, and
Right.
there's the process. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think that's fabulous, and we're going to be talking about this a little bit at our event.
Mm.
And then I would also add, let's say, some of the exterior structures to it. So you're talking, the interior structures, and let me just share with the audience a little bit about some potential exterior structures.
Sure.
I think one of the things for me, or the way that I think about it, is that there's a lot of unknowns and it's very fast paced. However, what I'm looking for is the foundation of, let's say, what's the difference between human intelligence and an artificial intelligence? What's the capabilities? What's the functionality of AI versus, a human being?
Yeah.
And how might that inform, our decisions personally as business owners and executives, given that? And so I think there's a level where some knowledge is powerful. Some trust and faith is powerful. A lot of flexibility and adaptability is powerful.
Yeah.
I'm beginning to believe that flexibility and adaptability is the number one character trait of a leader, just personally.
Mm.
But yeah, if I could share a couple of things about, let's say, human intelligence and artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is just a giant simulation on a large volume of data.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been pre trained to pattern match. And so it's super good with logical and rational stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very different to the way a human being exists and operates.
Mm-hmm.
And so, AI is not very good at generalizing its learnings. AI doesn't really have a good grasp of the context that it's in.
Mm-hmm.
AI doesn't have the ability to have a genuine emotive relationship, at least not yet. But
Yeah.
obviously, all this stuff will change as we go. And so I think it's helpful to have some foundational principles or heuristics from which we can lead.
Yep.
And, and one of the biggest ones for me is it's like, well, what is the difference that makes the difference in a human versus what's available and emerging in the AI space? And how does that inform our human capital strategy? How does that inform our communications with our people?
Yeah.
How does that inform the value proposition that we take to market, et cetera, et cetera? And so, yeah, that's some of the stuff that we're gonna be sharing, and we'll get into as we do, the rest of these podcasts. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that stuff?
The word that stood out for me that you used there, Andrew, was context.
Yeah.
That in leadership, context is king, and that is a very unknown
And
thing.
Queen.
Yeah, and Queen, like context is everything. So we advocate for contextual leadership, which is
Yep.
leading through multiple perspectives. And so it's being clear about what I'm about, what my intention is. It's being clear about what belief structures and value structures I'm leaning on rather than had by.
Mm-hmm.
Being clear upon what the structures and patterns of my thinking are, how they generalize and how they process outside of my awareness. So there's
Mm.
the first person perspective. Second person perspective is being clear on the kind of relationships and how I want to go about those relationships, the depth of connection that I want to make with people in order to get the influence I want to get toward the outcomes we both agree are necessary.
Mm.
And then I want to then focus on the actions, the behaviors, the steps, the stages, the results. I want to focus on performance. And so I've got to be able to take performance into account, because performance will often contradict with intention, for example. And so managing those contradictions, those polarities, is super important. And to do that, we need to understand context. We need to understand perspectives. And then I want to step into the environment perspective, the fourth person. And I want to understand all of the different aspects of context that include resources, people, time, that include process, that include systems, that include the environment, the ecosystems that exist there, people, people's personal lives, their professional lives, their hobby lives, their why, etc. All that into one. Context is absolutely king and queen.
Right.
And that's what
That's
really
so
stands out
good.
for me, that is different from AI. AI, as you say, so far, I'm not saying it won't get
Mm.
there. When it does, I'll be out of a job.
The ambiguity, right? When it does, you and I will probably be on a beach in Thailand by the sounds of it, I reckon.
Thailand's lovely. Kisanui.
Drinking coconut water.
That's right.
No, I love what you're sharing. And actually, what come up when you were talking about context, this is going to be a big thing that we talk about next week. You hear all the time, really senior, well-respected people that are leaders in industries. Like, for example, Mark Andreessen comes up as one, in the finance space, and he said, people shouldn't bring their personal stuff to work. Work is work, and personal is personal, and that is just such a blind way of leading a company to me,
Well,
because it's impossible not.
it's a great way for creating work-life balance problems.
Right. Right. And it's a great way to cut yourself off from the relations that you need to be functioning in a business for the business to be thriving. And, I can't remember whether it was you that first said this to me or someone else. So, but all tasks that we do have a context of the relationship that they're done in.
Yep.
And that's stuck with me for a long time now. And I see the truth in that more and more
Yeah.
every day. And we have a relationship with the technology that we use. We have a relationship with the people that we're interacting with. We have a relationship with the business that we're in. And people actually don't see this, so they don't know how to lead with it. Yeah.
Exactly. And so AI's got no chance at the moment. It might have a chance if you, the AI user, knew this, you could give it this context, but it's not going to find this context, it's not going to default to this context on its own because
Right.
it's
Exactly.
not programmed to. We need to be able
No.
to teach it what context is. But the frame running the game is the context.
Yes.
And so everything is within a frame, and everything is related to a frame. Everything we do, and that's how we human beings create meaning. And then what AI absolutely cannot do is, we absolutely know from human beings that meaning drives performance, and so people perform their meanings. So that a leader's role is really about creating and setting the frames of meaning that drive the performance that they want.
Gotcha.
It's
Yeah.
not about achieving the tasks. AI can take that and do it for you these days. So when most leaders are spending 90% of their time, that's going to be taken away from them. They've got to reset themselves as actual leaders of human beings.
Right, 100% agree. And so actually we might slow down and go back and just step through this a little bit for people that mightn't be familiar with the language or the semantics that we're using. And then we might come to, what do we really mean by context and AI? But if I could ask you, Jay, you said that intention and performance don't often align and there can be contradictions there.
Yeah.
And then you introduced this notion of meaning as well. So could you give us maybe just an example of how intention, performance, and meaning might line up and how they might be bound by the context? Is that
Yeah.
possible off the cuff?
Yeah, so an organization might have an intention, and the intention is to be a people centric, people focused, customer centric organization. But at the end of the
Mm,
day, they reward performance that is not that. And it's a
right.
contradiction, right? And now people have got to manage that contradiction between what we say we want, what we're actually doing to get the results. And so
Right.
there's huge contradictions, and those contradictions rise up inside of us and create the
Mm,
confusion and create the overwhelm because
mm.
hang on, you're asking me to do more with less? How does that work?
Right. And that's what people have been asked of them for probably 50 years now, right?
Yeah, and we're going to go there. That's the biggest downsizing we're going to see, is people are going to be
Mm.
asked to do more with less. The truth is that they don't need to do more with less. They need to reinvent themselves.
Totally agree. And that therein, I guess, is the essence of, let's say, meaning, yeah? Did you want to talk any more into meaning before we perhaps go to AI and context? Is there anything you want to say on that?
Well, meaning, we make meaning at different levels. We make conventional meaning, which is, if I ask you, Andrew, why do you do what you do? The average person will say, oh, it's a good job, it's well
Yeah,
located, they're great
pays well.
people, pays well.
Yeah.
All of that's
Mm.
very much manana meaning. It's average level meaning. It's not going to drive a great performance. It's going to drive an average performance. To get to
Mm.
drive like real performances, we need to look at, and I work with high performing teams. Let's look at the All Blacks. Yeah, and the
Yeah.
All Blacks,
Yeah.
the meaning that the All Blacks have held over the last 20 years has driven their performance beyond their competitors on average.
Mm. Mm.
They've lifted, sure, they might not have lifted as many trophies as South Africa, but they've lifted more trophies overall than South Africa, and they've devastated more teams than South Africa, and they're
Right.
they're 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 more revered and feared than someone like
Totally.
South Africa. And
Yeah.
so, they are all about their brand and all about what it means to be an All Black, to pull that jersey on has real meaning. Once an All Black, always an All Black. And
Right.
what that means is that, you have not conventional level meanings, but you have sacred meanings. You have meanings about what it is you do that are extremely valuable, that you appreciate and are grateful for and express on a daily basis. When a human being
Mm,
has that level of meaning, their performance changes. Now, this is true
mm.
for everybody. If you pick something that you do well, whether it's cooking or out in the golf cart, or whether it's spending time with your kids, walking the dogs, whether it's being able to focus, etc. Whatever your superpower is, look at the meaning that you bring to doing that. If you're a great cook or a great chef, if I said to a great chef, why do you do what you do? I'm going to get a very different answer than if I go into the average cafe and go, why do you do what you do?
Yes, true. Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
yeah.
meaning. And
Mm.
so we are meaning makers. And so leadership is about constructing, creating, and applying leadership in a way that influences people and motivates them toward what it is that we agree to happen.
Yeah, fabulous. Yeah, great share. Thank you. And a great example. Love the All Blacks. Even though I'm obviously Aussie through and through. There's not too many things that make my spine tingle like the haka does.
Yeah.
Particularly good one anyway. Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? Same with the and I'm not a rugby guy, but same with the Welsh national anthem when sitting in
Oh,
Cardiff. Millennium Stadium, right? And I think this is in part also what we're talking about in terms of, the context. So there's bigger context. If I think about when I was in the World Cup, sitting in the Millennium Stadium, watching Wales and Australia, and of course there's a rugby game going on, but actually most of my meaning was coming from all of the surrounds. The
yeah.
environment, actually just being there,
The singing.
wearing Australian. Oh, the singing. I didn't know the Welsh could belt a tune like that. It was quite incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
just the whole environment and situation, and so that talks into the context.
Yeah.
And I probably just wanted to share with people just a quick little experiment they can do, for themselves when you're chatting with your LLM, whatever it is, ChatGPT, Claude,
Yep.
Perplexity, whatever you're using. Just notice for a moment that the quality of the output that you're getting from your large language model is directly a function of the input that you give it.
Yep.
And the input that you give it, I remember just a few months ago, maybe a year ago, we were all talking about how prompt engineering was going to be, the new thing. And we're going to have all sorts of jobs of prompt engineering, etc. And they never came about. And so people are doing their own thing with the prompts. And so the results that an individual is getting from the utility of the AI is actually a function of that person's meaning making structures,
Yeah.
because that's what's going in as an input.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing to notice. And then the second thing to notice is that if you give an AI more specific, personalized or organizational
Or
um,
contextual.
knowledge, contextual knowledge, you'll get a better result, um, again. And so, we see in the development of AI now, we've got, RAG systems, so retrieval and augmentation systems. And so we're putting our knowledge base in a RAG solution, and we're having that addressable by a large language model. And you'll get a better result by applying the organizational knowledge and context
Yep.
to the query that you're giving the language model. And so this is a direct example of what we're talking about when we're talking about we need to lead the context going forward,
Well,
not
not
the
only,
content.
yeah, not only to give the AI an understanding of what we're looking for from a contextual perspective, but to give it direction in terms of what we want it to reference in order to make meaning. So,
Right.
if we leave it up to itself, it'll default to, as you say, uh, rational, logical, usually pretty average meaning making. It won't
Right.
default to the kind of sacred meaning making and then therefore output unless we tell it what to reference and how to reference it in that context
Right.
as well.
Right. So it'll give you like a mundane kind of blah, beige kind of answer unless you give it the sacredness.
Yeah. So to give it the sacredness, I'll often when I prompt AI, I'll have it think, but not write, but think
Mm.
in terms of perspectives. I want it to think in terms of all perspectives, but then write from what it sees, not to the perspectives, and then
Yeah, I
you get
love
a
that.
completely different result doing that than I would get if I'm working a program or something. If I just asked it to do that with just the basic context, I'll get a completely
Right.
different result. I get a completely different way of thinking because I'm showing it how I want it to think.
Right, exactly. And
So that
and
comes
and
from me.
maybe we'll,
It can't
comes
surpass
from you.
me. Yeah.
Right. And then I'm going to add to that. And by adding to it, I'm going to take us all the way back to the start. And then, maybe you can land the plane for us today, Jay. But you were talking at the start, an inability to get out of first person perspective, to get out of your own, let's say, narcissistic bubble. And I'm sure that most people don't consider themselves to be narcissistic, but it's just that often we come from our own first person perspective a lot of the time.
Well, we're all
And
narcissistic.
so,
To what degree, Andrew?
to a certain degree. Yeah, exactly. And so one of the things that I'll do with AI is I'll actually ask it how it would like me to use it,
Yep.
how it would like me to relate with it,
Yep.
how it would like me to integrate it into the system of what I'm doing.
Right.
And so this is using those multiple perspectives that you talked about. And what I've actually found by having empathy for the AI, shifting into its perspective,
Yeah.
the results that I get from the AI is so much better,
Yeah.
so much better. And so I love what you're open with, and thought I'd give a
Yeah. For
practical
ex-
example of
for
that.
example, people using AI might experience what we experience, which it melts down every now and then. And when it melts down, it just produces rubbish, right? But you see, what we got to understand is why it's melting down.
Mm.
So as it melts down, as it's being overused, and as its resources are being pulled, like AI, for example, Andrew, is to the point where it's starting to use more electricity than human beings.
Yeah,
So
right.
so it's massively drawing on global resources,
Amazing.
and it's going to continue as it evolves. And
Mm.
so understanding that the parameters that it's struggling with, that's facilitating it, and then breaking that down, for example, and you can ask it. That's the other thing you said before. You can ask it, what parameters are you struggling with because you don't seem to be able to deliver what I'm asking for? What are the parameters
Right.
at play here that we need to consider? And it'll tell you. It'll tell you it'll say, the document you've uploaded is too big for me to process in one go. I need to process it in 3 lots. It's okay. You could say to it, yeah, tell me that in future, and it's going to go, yes, no problem, but it won't.
It
You
won't.
have
Yeah,
to
because it
you
doesn't have
have
any
to
memory.
prompt you have to prompt it every single time. And then
Right.
and then so the question you were asking is really the oldest question in coaching. Yeah, and
Oh, okay.
it's the go to for a guy who I learned from called Graham Richardson. And his
Okay.
favorite question when the client was stuck, he never got stuck, but the
Mm.
client got stuck a lot, was, if you
Mm.
were me, what question would you ask
Yeah.
me right now?
Yeah. Love that. Love
So he
it
just
so
flips
much.
that script. If you were me, what question do you need to ask yourself?
Yeah. 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 Brilliant
And
question.
then it's interesting to see what comes out their mouth at that point.
Right.
Uh, so it's the same thing. Using the script on AI delivers definitely different results. But what this is really all pointing out, and to really land the plane, is that AI can't actually do context, and
No.
therefore it can't do complex meaning. And
Exactly.
so we need to grow that within ourselves to bring to AI to direct it. So there's the need for our growth and development in complex thinking, in
Yeah.
growing the level of our ability to hold more complexity so that we can simplify it.
So perversely, I think that leads me to, at the moment at least, to have this belief that this is actually, we're coming into the age of thinking. And so that might sound a little bit odd because we've had the rational age and we've gone to the postmodern age. We've had an information age. We've had all sorts, right? But I sort of see it as being, you can't out AI the AI. And so it can work with a huge volume of patterns that we simply can't, and a huge volume of information that we simply can't. So we have access to different realms of information. But really, what's going to emerge, at least in the next 24 months, is, from my humble point of view, is that it's going to require, that complexity of thinking. So what is the contextual inputs that are going in to drive the engine or the system that we're looking to drive?
Yep.
And so, that's where I'm spending a lot of time with people at the moment, and will be for the months ahead. I think that's what we're going to talk about a lot next week. And is there anything you wanted to mention before we close up for today?
So to add to the belief that we're in the age of thinking, I would say we're in the age of contextual thinking.
Contextual thinking.
And the capacity to think through context is going to determine how we go about things, is going to determine how the results that we achieve, particularly as we go through a tough period of realignment. I think everything's going to be realigned. Our whole financial system's going to need realigning. We're going to need universal income in the next 5-10 years, because we're just not going to have the basic doing roles, because AI will step in and take a lot of those. And so we're going to have to rethink our whole approach to how we do our stuff. Yeah, and that's going to require leadership, and it's going to require contextual thinking.
Yeah, amazing. And for that to occur, that requires a development in one's complexity. And so maybe that's a good subject for us to talk about on our next podcast. But for now, Jay, that was awesome.
Great.
Thank you so much. And for the audience, please feel free to leave us a comment below. Ask us any questions that you want us to cover in future.
We won't
share with us your thought. We won't answer them. Is that what you said? We'll get AI to answer them. All right. Big love, everyone.